you've got to help you get it moving. It's not easy at all. If you've got a great idea, there's a process, there's a whole legislative process where you introduce it to a committee, they ask you questions, they determine if it should move forward and pass to the full House. I was in the House, and then it has to go to the Senate, and they have the same process where it goes through committee. And if they disagree, then sometimes they have a conference committee where they come together to change it. But the truth of the matter is that if the leadership in the House and the Senate, and even in the governor's office, don't want legislation to be passed, it's not going to get passed. The leaders are the ones who determine the agenda as to what gets even voted on.
So one of those objects is done.
Well, depends.
Mhm.
But yeah, if the governor and the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate don't want something to pass, then it doesn't. But if they do want something to pass, they can also move it through the whole process quickly. So it depends, on what it is and who's bringing it up and what it involves. And I'll tell you a true story. I introduced a piece of legislation to take Social Security numbers off a driver's license. It was a good idea. At that time, you had your Social Security numbers right on your driver's license. And they didn't let the legislation pass because probably I was in the minority party, but they recognized it was a good idea, and months later, they rolled it into a piece of legislation that had several different parts to it, and that was one of the parts. So my good idea was actually adopted into another piece of legislation.
I would love to see truth in legislating take place, where you wouldn't allow a whole bunch of bills to be all rolled into one together, and then you're voting on a whole package. I think each one should be voted on separately by themselves.
Well, it's interesting because they often will have these, they call it an omnibus amendment, and in an omnibus amendment, they have several different amendments that get adopted, and sometimes, it has to be germane to the issue, so they find legislation that they can tack it onto, but that does happen. You've got, as a legislator, the responsibility to pay attention, do your homework, and read what's coming your way, but sometimes if they move it fast, it could go right past you. You could vote for something and not be 100% sure exactly what was in there. So that happens at the state level. I'm sure it happens at the federal
it's
level.
happening with the infrastructure bill now.
Yes.
Most of us believe that infrastructure is roads, bridges,
Yes.
We had to
canals,
pass it to
rivers,
know what was in
buildings,
it.
Yeah.
and all
Trains.
this other stuff. Anyway, Tom Kelly is
And good
going to
investment.
Tom Kelly is going to cover all this stuff in his program coming up at 12 o'clock. So make sure you stay with Tom until 2 o'clock today. Here's a song by a fellow named Jerry Timlin, and it's called Mary Ellen Carter. The Clancy brothers used to sing this a lot.